Good evening, America, and welcome to Chateau Montelena. I'm Brian Baker. Welcome to Montelena Live. We are broadcasting from inside the old chateau here in Calistoga, California. We're actually inside the kitchen of the chateau, which is where everybody knows the best parties always happen. Tonight we have a fantastic show scheduled for you. I'm going to be interviewing our winemaker, Matt Crafton, and we're going to be talking about some old Chardonnay, some library vintage Chardonnay, some really, really very special wines. For those of you that have not been to Chateau Montelena or know a little bit about us, we're a real simple story. The castle we're in right now was built in 1882 by A.L. Tubbs. He had a very simple philosophy. He was a Francophile. He wanted to make a Bordeaux in the style, a red in the style of Bordeaux and a white wine in the style of Burgundy. Fast forward to 1972, and Jim Barrett purchases Chateau Montelena and carries on that exact same tradition. So we make old world-styled wines with California fruit, which is the reason why we can talk to you today about old Chardonnay. So let me tell you what we're doing today on the MontelenaLIVE format. We hope you will ask us questions. We'll get to all of those questions later in the show. Our winemaker, Matt Crafton, is here to answer anything and everything you want to do, from stories about the winery to all those good dirt and acid questions if you want to go there. We also have a very special guest with us tonight. We have James Noakes, who is a wine writer from the Chicagoland area. James, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. As I said, later on, we'll be answering questions that each and every one of you sends to us. At this time, I would like to introduce Matt Crafton, the winemaker at Chateau Montelena. Matt has been with us for more than 9 years and was recently promoted last June to winemaker. Matt, welcome to MontelenaLIVE.
Thanks, Brian. Wanted to give everyone a little background on Montelena Chardonnay, I think, to start. And I think a great place to begin is to remind people that Montelena's Chardonnay history is really the history of Napa Valley Chardonnay in the modern era. When Jim Barrett and Mike Gergich wanted to make the first Montelena Chardonnay in 1972, there was more Riesling planted here in the Napa Valley, actually, than Chardonnay. So there really wasn't an American or even a Napa Valley precedent to start with. So as one would expect, they looked to Burgundy as a model for our wine. But I think, as everyone knows, Chardonnay and Burgundy is really different. Well, Burgundy in general is different from Napa Valley, from California. So how do you get the best parts of Burgundy, you know, the ageability, the classic structure, the texture, and how do you combine that with the unique flavors we get here in the valley? And it starts with the right grape in the right place, something we talk about a lot.
Okay.
But in 1972, we had no idea where the best Chardonnay was grown to fit that. So if you ever have a chance to take a look at the label from our 72 and even our 1973, the famous 1973 Chardonnay that won the Judgment of Paris in 1976 and sits in the Smithsonian, those wines were blends of a number of different vineyards across both Napa and Sonoma.
Sort of mutts, if you will.
They were mutts. They had no idea. We didn't know where to start. Now we do. So today, the vast majority of our Chardonnay comes from the west side of Oak Knoll, which is on right north of the city of Napa. And why is it there? One word: latitude. And you can see our vineyards up on the screen right now. It's a really special place because to get the ripe California flavors that we want and also the bright acidity that Montelena is known for, you need to have a place that gets really nice and warm during the day, but also gets cool at night. So
that's the west side,
That's the west side, and that's south. That's the south side of the valley. So that's the first piece. The second piece is what we've developed to actually cultivate and to make those flavors, those aromas, that acid profile really show through. And one of the things we started doing 15 years ago is we pioneered night harvesting.
Night harvesting?
Literally, we send the crew out at 2 in the morning once it's cold, and you can see it right now. The guys go out wearing headlamps, we have light booms, and as soon as it gets below 50 degrees, the crew jumps to action, and we pick all of our fruit in an hour, hour and a half. And it shows up to the winery, it's cold, the acidity is preserved, the flavors are crisp, and then from here, that's when the real winemaking magic begins. That's when we decide, how do we press this fruit? How do we handle it? What do we do to show off the best parts of each vintage and our vineyards? Because there's no magic formula. You know, there's this, I wish when I got promoted, Bo opened the safe and there was this, you know, this is how you make the best Chardonnay in the world, but there isn't. We have to decide, we have to taste it. We have to say, how do we maintain the Montelena style while also being true to our incredible vineyards and then these amazing vintages we have here in the Napa Valley. And I'm really excited to show off these wines we have today because I think each and every one is an example of how we do that.
So that's really a great segue, Matt, because we're doing old Chardonnay today, and I just want you to understand, America, that this is not because we kicked over a tarp in the cellar and found a bunch of cases. We've actually been planning this program, these Chardonnay library wines, for more than 7 years. We've been actually saving wine from each vintage because we know, based on the way the wine is made, the right grape in the right place, that these wines will age just like old Burgundy, very similar to the style of what A.L. Tubbs first started here more than a century ago, and what the Barrett family has done since 1972.
And Brian's not joking about doing this on purpose. We have a warehouse that looks like Raiders of the Lost Ark with all these wines stacked in it. So this was a very purpose-built program.
Absolutely. So why don't we get started with our first wine? We're going to start with the 06 vintage. Now, Matt, this is a 10-year-old Chardonnay. What do you remember about 2006?
I think this is a great place to start because this is where we put, you know, our money where our mouths are. This is a 10-year-old Chardonnay. Most people think that you open the cellar, you open your closet and say, ooh, a 10-year-old white wine. I'm really freaked out. But right in front of us, I mean, look at the color on that wine. This is a 10-year-old white wine. And when we make the wine in the cellar and we think about how it's going to develop and how it's going to age and how it's going to show, we say, okay, 10 years is a really good spot because you have those really still beautiful fruity primary flavors. You have a little bit of the influence of the fermentation we use when we whole cluster press and some of the fruit we destem, and then you have a little bit of influence in the barrel and the aging. 10 years is where everything comes together.
And one of the things that we should let you all know in America is that we have 3 different types of vintages that we see here on the North Coast. We have a cool vintage season, we have a warm vintage season, and then we have that thing right in between that we lovingly call Goldilocks.
That's right, not too hot, not too cold.
So tonight we're going to actually look at, of the 6 wines we're doing, we've got one Goldilocks in there.
We definitely do.
And we've got some cool, and we've got a couple warm vintages in there too, don't we?
Definitely, it's a pretty special lineup.
Outstanding. So what I love about this 06, again, on the color in particular, is the nose that you get off of this wine. It has that wonderful Burgundian, I don't want to use the word cheese in the wrong way, but it does have that certain amount of aged Chardonnay going on in it, doesn't it?
And 2006 was a cool vintage in general, and I think something that is some people really grapple with is the fact of, what does the vintage do? What does the weather do to influence the wine? And a good rule of thumb is that these cool vintages, when things are consistent and moderate, is you get incredibly concentrated flavors, and then you get crisp acidity that really flows through from start to finish. And 06 was definitely one of those vintages.
And a cooler vintage then, by that measure, would be really more desirable than a warm vintage, because if I'm guessing right, the cooler vintages are going to age longer.
Absolutely.
Because they have more acid, right?
Without question. And,
okay.
And it's again, it's counterintuitive, especially if you like reading all the yellow journalism wine magazines where they fall in love with these hot vintages. But from a Chardonnay perspective, you actually want the cool vintages. That's what allows these wines to develop and to age, and wines that you can lay down and enjoy 5, 10, 15 years from now.
And a very, very appropriate metaphor calling it yellow journalism while we are tasting Chardonnay.
Absolutely.
I like that very much.
I didn't say golden, I said yellow.
Excellent. Let's go on to the 07 vintage. What I remember about 07 is that this is sort of that surprise. This is Goldilocks. This is not too hot, not too warm, just right, right?
That's absolutely right. And occasionally we get these years that come through where the sun comes out, we get everything, the Napa Valley sunshine that you picture when you close your eyes and you think about the Napa Valley, these beautiful warm days with wonderful breezes and bright acidity. Cool nights that give you the bright acidity. It kind of takes the best of both types of vintages. So it's not too hot, it's not too cold. Just enough heat to get everything fully ripened to show off California, but cool enough to make things bright and zesty on the palate and to give you a wine that's really ageable.
And speaking,
there he is.
James, how you
is back.
doing?
How you doing,
Good to
buddy?
see ya. And
Can't hear you, but we can see you.
Cheers.
You can use a poster board.
And speaking of 07, I mean, that is one of those vintages that both the whites and the reds were very well.
Definitely.
Came out very well, right?
Absolutely. And it's you know, it happens. I'd say that when we talk about vintages here in the Napa Valley, we have such little vintage variation relative to the rest of the world. You know, Burgundy, Bordeaux, South Africa, Australia, you're talking high peaks and low valleys. In the Napa Valley, we're so blessed to have incredibly consistent vintages. We're just subtle tweaks in the weather, extra couple hours of fog one day, and another day when it warms up a little bit earlier. That can make the difference, and that's what we're really trying to tease out. And I think the 07 is a great example of the wine where we took the best of the warm days, and then we have lots of melon, lots of tropical notes, lots of pineapple, and then we also have the acidity that we love out of the 06.
Excellent. And James has joined us on camera. We can't hear him yet, but perhaps we can fix that as we talk and move on to the 08, because I'd love to have James give us a question or two. Okay,
that'd be nice.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be swirling. So that was a really good example.
Apparently we can swirl, but not on the countertop.
Not on the counter. That's correct.
Clearly
exactly
we're not professionals.
So let's move out and let's move on to the 08. I've got a great story about the 08, actually. I started at Chateau Montelena on April 21st, 2008, which of course was
the famous frost of 2008.
And it was the 21st and the 22nd.
Yes.
And as I remember the story, the temperature dropped 7 degrees in 15 minutes. It went from 32 degrees, which is freezing, down to 26 degrees, which is actually more critical when it comes to a grape. Is that right?
Without a doubt. And it's not only the difference in temperature, but as you noted, it's that rapid change. So I'm sure our vineyard manager was pulling out his hair watching that thermometer drop. And we had not only did we see some frost damage here on the estate, but it really affected our Chardonnay in a big way. And that early on in the year, you're dealing with really delicate shoots and clusters that haven't really developed yet. And any kind of frost damage you have really affects not only the yield, but how the grapes grow throughout the rest of the growing season. So essentially, we did all of our thinning that we would normally do throughout the year. Nature did it for us in April.
So we have a question from Stephen Schmitz. Stephen says, talking about the 2006 vintage being cold, what is 2015 looking like right now for Napa?
That's a great question, Stephen. Thank you. I was actually out in the Chardonnay vineyards this morning at sunrise, and it is shaping up to be ideal. I guess we're all big dreamers,
right?
And we all want to hope for the best, but in reality, it's been a fantastic growing season so far. We've had I can speak about the Chardonnay specifically. We've had fog in the Oak Knoll district up until about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. We've had warm temperatures throughout the day. We've had incredible breezes, especially right now. We have this onshore breeze coming off the Pacific that's cooling things down right around 4 or 5 o'clock, and everything is maturing at a really consistent rate. And that's really what you want in farming. You want the fruit to mature at the same time, the flavors to develop at the same time. Obviously, we can take care of that. We can selectively pick if we have to, but the best case scenario is for us to be able to go through, taste the fruit, say, okay, it's ready, and grab it. And
now, America probably heard that yesterday, Mum, who is a sparkling producer, harvested the first fruit, which officially kicks off the vintage in Napa. That's an early start, right?
It is. It's an early start for them. And the sparkling wine world is very different from what we do. They're looking for different flavors. They're looking for different sugar levels, different acidity levels. But you're right. This really kicks off the beginning of the 2015 harvest. If you would have asked me 2 months ago, is this going to be an early year, a late year? I would say, oh my gosh, this is going to be an early year. We had early bud break, but we've had such cool, consistent weather through 2015. We're probably a little bit ahead, maybe closer to average.
Okay.
But we're still encouraged. We see.
So what does that mean for us here at the Chateau? Will we be harvesting in September like usual, or maybe the last week of August?
I think right now, if I were to look into my crystal ball, I'd say the last week of August is most likely.
Okay.
But, that can change with the weather. And I've learned, from a lot of experience, don't make bets on these kinds of things.
Exactly.
But what we do know is that the really long growing season allows for incredible flavor development. And we've seen that year in, year out. And that's the experience we have in working in these vineyards, and especially in our Chardonnay, where we have so much experience in this area. We know from these types of vintages what we can expect. And that's very consistent, rich flavor development and concentration from vintages like 2015.
Excellent. So to wrap up the 08, we've got a frost vintage, which I usually describe as being one of those Irish family stories. You've got 10 kids eating at the table and 3 go off to college. And the 7 don't only eat like 7, they still get to eat with the resources of 10. So you got a lot of concentration in this, didn't we?
That's right. So each vine had less fruit had less fruit to mature, essentially, and consequently, it was able to put more energy into ripening those clusters.
That's fantastic.
And we ended up with, again, great concentration, really great flavor development. I just wish we had more of the 08.
Okay, I wish we did too. So this is the 08 vintage. Let's move on to 2009. Matt, what can you remember about 2009 that's significant to you?
So 2009 was the first in a series of 3 cool vintages, and I had the distinct pleasure of taking over the white wine program here at that point, and was feeling really good about myself, really gonna make this Chardonnay great, and I was pretty high on my horse. And I remember the first day of harvest, we just harvested our first big, large lot of Chardonnay with 10-ton tank. Interns were on the top, taking a look at the juice coming in from the press, and I'm walking around feeling really good. And I remember looking at the floor, then looking up, and before I knew it, I had 50 gallons of Chardonnay juice come flying down, landing on top of my head, and putting me back in my place.
Welcome, rookie.
Welcome.
Right? Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so 2009 was the first of 3 cool vintages that are all really unique and different. But I think that on the heels of the 08 and then the 07 before that, it gave us an opportunity to show off some really interesting things that are different about 2009 compared to what we'd seen the 2 previous
But 2009
vintages.
did have some warming trends in it, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
It got a little bit warm towards the ends of August. It wasn't as cool as 2006, but coming on the heels of a very compressed vintage because of the frosts in 08 and then a Goldilocks vintage in 07, we made some decisions at the crush pad when we picked to highlight the best parts of that 2009 vintage. So more whole cluster in the press, again, cold fermentations, things that say, okay, got a lot of nice green apple, a lot of nice floral aromatics.
Okay.
We had, of course, incredible acid, and how do we show that off? And so 09 set the stage essentially for the next 2 vintages and how we could make this wine during these cool vintages and how we could make it better and better.
And we probably should have said this earlier, but all the wines that we're having tonight and all the wines we make here, they don't go through malolactic fermentation, do they?
That's right. So for those of you that don't know, malolactic fermentation or conversion, and I'm not going to get geeky on this, I promise.
No dirt and acid tonight, huh?
So what that basically means is that bacteria convert the malic acid, which is the acid that is predominantly found in apples, to lactic acid, which is softer and a little bit more lush. And we don't put our wines through that conversion because we really like that rich apple-like acidity, that brightness that lifts the fruit and elevates the aromas.
Okay.
Not a lot of people do that. It's something that's very unique to us, and I think that's what sets the Montelena style apart from most of our friends and neighbors.
And that goes back to right grape in the right place,
That's
because if we were in Carneros growing Chardonnay,
and we tried to do that, we'd all lose our tooth enamel.
Because we'd have to go through malolactic.
Exactly. The wines would be so tart we couldn't do this. And so being an oak knoll where we are gives us the ability to do that while keeping the rest of the flavors and the rest of the aromas in balance.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm very impressed with the color on this wine. I mean, we're again talking about a 6-year-old Chardonnay that looks exactly the same color as our current 2012 release.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Beautiful wine.
I hope all of you in TV land are drinking along with us.
And if you have any questions, please message us through the ToutSuite site if you're logged on, and we are answering questions as they come in. So let's go on to the 2010 vintage.
Thank you.
2010. What do we remember about 2010, Matt?
2010, well, 2010 began like 2009 did. It started off like a lamb, and then we were all ready to go for this cool vintage. We thought we had it licked. We thought that, okay, we're going to open our canopies up. We were pretty conservative on that. Why would we open our canopies? It's a cool vintage. We wanted to get airflow through. We wanted the grapes to get as much sun as they could, given that it seemed like we were in store for another cool vintage.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, the end of August showed up.
Oh, those famous 3 days, right?
Famous 3 days where it went from, I want to say the day before, do you remember what the day?
August 25th, 26th, 27th.
I want to say that early that week, the temperatures were topping out in the low 70s. And then one day it went to 100, 102. And as Bo Barrett likes to say, we had what he calls a Norwegians on the beach event.
Norwegians on the beach. That is the phenomena when some producers actually trim their canopies up to reveal their clusters,
That's
right?
right, exactly.
And then that sun comes in at 102 degrees.
After they hadn't seen any sun.
And no sun, and suddenly you've got sunburned grapes on one side, raisins actually,
Raisins,
and the other side you've got normal fruit.
That's exactly right.
It's still not right.
That's still not right. There was a lot of hair pulling that vintage. Thankfully for us, we've seen this sort of phenomena before. And I have to say, it's a real testament to our winemaking team here, our vineyard manager, to all of the people who are involved in our farming operations to say, I don't know if I'm comfortable opening up this canopy as far as everybody else.
Well, that goes back to the fact that we've been doing this for 42 years.
That's right.
And we'd seen pretty much every pattern, almost, you could see.
And
we kind of went to the book and said, maybe we should not trim our canopies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so while we did get the benefits of the heat, we did get a little bit more ripeness, and we did get a little more warm weather character in the wines, we didn't get burned.
It's a delicious wine, and we're now drinking a 5-year-old Chardonnay. And I think that's a really important point you made earlier, that when we build our Chardonnays, we build them on a 10-year peak. And there are some Chardonnays, California style, that are built on a 2 to 3 year.
That's right. There are plenty of wines on the market, and this isn't just California, this is around the world, where they really want the wine to taste its absolute best as soon as it gets in your hands, so that you can drink it that night and it's never going to taste any better. For us, we take more of a long-term approach. Of course, the wine's going to be delicious upon release, but we see all of the flavors, the aromas, the complexity, all of that coming together in about 10 years. Now, that being said, there are plenty of people that hold on to our wines a lot longer than 10 years.
Right.
We recently tasted our wines back to the 1970s, and I can tell you that there were some absolutely fantastic vintages in there. And if you like aged Chardonnay, our wine will absolutely perform for you.
We have James back. James, can you hear us? Yes, but we can't hear you. James, are you enjoying the wines that we're having so far?
Do we get a thumbs up?
1 thumb? 2 thumbs?
2 thumbs? No, he's shaking his head.
2 thumbs. All right,
2
excellent.
thumbs.
2 thumbs from Chicagoland.
I'll take it.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Maybe you can text us a message. There you go.
Yes.
No?
No. Text,
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. No.
Okay. This is fantastic. Exactly.
Yeah.
So James is in Chicagoland enjoying each of these wines with us. Exactly.
Yes.
So let's move on to our 2011,
That sounds
shall
great.
we?
That sounds great.
And I want to introduce the 2011 because Bo Barrett told me this, and I made him repeat it 3 times. He thought it was the best Chardonnay we'd ever made at Montelena, which is a pretty high bar to reach considering the 73 sort of changed the wine world, right?
I would say so. And honestly, when we were in the midst of the 2011 vintage, I remember picking this fruit and being like, oh my gosh, this Chardonnay is amazing. I mean, it's everything you could ask for in a vintage for Chardonnay. You were looking at really moderate temperatures, even ripening. We had wonderful breezes. We had enough sunlight. I mean, everything fell into place. And I'd say that the biggest distinctive factor of 2011 for Chardonnay was that there was really no variability in the fruit. So we'd go through and we taste through different
variability at all.
No variability. You taste through different rows, different blocks.
Okay.
We're looking across acres and acres of Chardonnay saying, okay, where do we start? Where do we stop when we pick?
Okay.
You go through when I went through the vineyards in 2011, it was like, oh my gosh, this vine tastes great. This vine tastes great.
Okay.
This block tastes great. This row tastes great. And we said, oh, everything is uniform. I mean, it was perfect. And when the fruit came in, it was just like, gosh, better not screw this up.
So when I first started here, I was told a story about the way we pick our grapes that has nothing to do with phenolics, with putting them in the sugar reader and things like that.
Right.
That there was actually a formula of if we taste 100 grapes and 98 of them are right. Do you guys really do that?
So I'll tell you what, I don't eat grapes 9 months out of the year because I probably eat 1,000, the first week of harvest. And it's really one of those things where you have to have the flavor development. You have to go through it. You have to taste it. It has to taste delicious. You can look at all the metrics, the acid, the pH. You can look at the bricks, whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, it has to taste delicious.
Steven's calling us.
Steven's calling us. Steven, what's up?
Steven?
James.
I'm sorry, James. I want you to call 707-363-8255. 5931.
And yes, that is Mr. Baker's cell phone for all of you out on TV land.
That's Lindsey Graham's cell phone. That's Donald Trump. So tell me some more things about the 11
While we're
that
waiting
you
for
thought
our,
made
for
it
our
great.
phone call, this is
Yeah.
great. This is like a call-in show.
No, James is going to call in. We're gonna put him on speaker. We're gonna make this work.
Perfect. So you know, when we got the fruit in here at the winery, like I said before, it was a phenomenon that we were all patting ourselves on the back, and we said, okay, it's here. Oh, there it is.
James, can you hear me? Excellent. James, welcome from Chicagoland.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I apologize. I've seen and heard you guys the whole time, but...
And we were brilliant, right?
No worries. James, you have patiently tasted all the wines with us. What questions do you have about these wines?
You know, I've really enjoyed the entire vertical here. Really excellent wines. Each one's very different, I feel. Yet there's a red line running through all of them. You can tell it's from similar properties. You can tell there's a similar restrained wine making technique being used. The star for me is that 2006.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about 2006. I really love the way that it feels at the very end. I love the way that like the oak has kind of peeled its layers away, and I'm getting more of that really nice full round kind of fruit in there. I like your nod to saying there's like an aged kind of cheese thing going on, like a Gruyere cheese or something like that. It's really beautiful. Do you expect each wine to age kind of like that? And then just tell me a little bit about your usage of oak, judicious use of oak that you use, and how it plays a part in the final product here.
Great. I'm just going to repeat those questions in case people missed them.
Yeah.
But I'd say James wants to know, one, why is the 2006 awesome?
Right.
And I would agree with that. And what we do we expect the rest of the wines to age in a similar fashion? And then talk a little bit about our oak program. So number one, when this wine was released, and in subsequent vintages afterwards, it didn't have this depth, this complexity. I mean, this is what all of these wines really turn into.
Right.
So at different points in this wine's evolution, certain pieces, maybe the I don't know, the fruit flavors on the palate, or the aromatics, or the acid can really dominate. But over time, all of those come into this really incredible balance, this equilibrium. And again, that all seems to hit right about 10 years. And I'd say when we look at, 5 years from now, so 5 years would be 2020,
right,
we'll be looking back at the 2010 vintage and saying the exact same thing.
Okay.
So yes, I do believe that these wines will age like this and will develop, because we've seen it happen, and it's part of our MO. In terms of the oak piece of the Chardonnay is really interesting. So the wine is aged for 10 months in 100% French oak barrels, most of which come from Limousin, center of France, but it's a very small percentage new. So we're looking somewhere in the 8 to 15% range.
Okay.
And when we taste the fruit coming in, and we taste the wine as it's coming out of the fermentation tanks, that's when we decide how much new oak to use. So oak is a spice. It's something that's supposed to accentuate and elevate the natural character of the wine.
Right.
And the easiest thing to do as a winemaker is to throw a brand new, expensive, overbearing French barrel at it, and then all of a sudden you have this very oaky chipped wine. For us, it's about using the oak as a spice to accentuate, nothing more than that. And we find that 8 to 15% is usually the sweet spot.
That's excellent. I've got two questions that I kind of want to put together. We did have a question from a food blogger I know out in Sonoma County named Lindy, who asked about when are the grapes ready to pick, which I think you answered, right? When the grapes are ready?
I think I've read her blog before.
But interestingly enough, right after that, Stephen Schmidt says, what are favorite pairing recommendations with these Chardonnays?
That's a great question. So I think food is a big part of what we do. You can't see, both Brian and I like to eat. That's why we love food bloggers too. But food pairing is a huge part of the wine business, and I think that if you can make a wine that is versatile, that chefs love, you've really succeeded.
Trout almondine.
Absolutely.
Sushi.
Without a doubt. Thai. I mean,
Thai food.
Absolutely.
Udon noodles.
That's right.
Things like that, right?
And even Italian
light-bodied.
cuisine.
Light-bodied.
That's right.
Right.
And the key, I think, is the acidity in the wine and the fruitiness. It's that balance that allows chefs to work
Got a
with
question
these.
from Lauren Watson, who is asking, why do we choose French versus American oak?
That's a great question. So French versus American. So it has to do with, French oak and American oak are two different species. And because of that, they impart completely different flavors. And for us, this is that classic side of Burgundy that we really like. And we find that the flavors that French oak impart balance well with the fruit flavors we get out of the vineyards. So that's a great question.
Excellent question. James, anything on the food pairing side?
For me, all of these are, I think, versatile. It could be a winter kind of white. You can have it with like some sort of chowder. You can enjoy it with something a little heavier. Or, like you just mentioned, you can do it with Thai food because of the acidity. You can do it with a salad. You can enjoy it in the summer. For me, this is nothing more than some cheese with a little stink on it, a couple of nuts, and pears.
Excellent.
Are we a couple of nuts?
Yeah. That's excellent. That's excellent.
My favorite for this.
That's great.
Outstanding.
And I think when you put this wine in the hands of chefs, they go crazy for it.
Yes.
They say, I can think outside the box. I can do something different. I can think about being creative with my menu. And it's always really exciting to see.
So, Matt, I got to ask a question. I've noticed in the role that I play here at Montelena, I'm on the road a lot, that I've seen a lot more people, and maybe James can comment on this as well after you answer, I've seen more producers moving more to our style, moving to less oak and maybe even a little less malolactic. Are you seeing that as well on the production side?
There's definitely a pendulum. Americans, for a long time, and I'd say not just Americans, but a lot of wine drinkers wanted these big, oaky, boozy kind of cocktail Chardonnays. And I think the pendulum is finally swinging back to our style, where people want purity. They want vineyard specificity.
Okay.
They want very precise wines that aren't overly processed. They want elegant. And so we're really happy, absolutely. Whether or not other people can pull off what we've been doing for 40 plus years remains to be seen. But we've always stayed true to what we are and who we are.
James, do you have any comment on the move that we're seeing of less oaky and less malolactic wines recently in the marketplace the last couple of years?
I think it's been a great change. I've really welcomed it. I've enjoyed it. I've seen a lot of stainless steel work being done. I've seen less new oak. I've seen more of a mixture in there where the oak is, like Matt said, it gives you a little spice, a little mouthfeel, but it's not this over-the-top creme brulee, buttery popcorn kind of thing. It's more balanced. And I really like that move. I think there's some really, really cool things being done in the wine world by talented winemakers like Matt that are really trying to say, this is what our site tastes like, not these are what these oak barrels taste like, not this is what everybody wants to buy. This is our piece of property, this is our land. And I think it's a really exciting time in the wine world. And I don't know if it's due to, and you guys might be able to answer this better, is it because of the educational process that's taking place in universities? Is it because winemakers are willing to take more of a chance? Is it a smarter consumer? What do you guys think of those three things? Is it all three in that, do you think, maybe?
James, that is a perfect wrap-up question for us on MontelenaLIVE. So what do you think?
That's a fantastic question. I think it's a combination of everything. I think the American wine consumer, because of bloggers, because of sommeliers, because of people learning to think for themselves, they're thinking outside the box and saying, well, what do I enjoy in my everyday life, and what do I like to do? What do I like to drink? I'm not satisfied drinking what's just old, whatever happens to show up on the shelf.
And I want to also emphasize the blogger portion of this, not just because James is on the line as a writer, but I know that recently we have seen a lot more care being taken in wine writing about what kind of food it goes with. And I think we're finally moving away from that era of cocktail wine that is simply drunk around the pool or drunk at a barbecue without food necessarily needing to go with it. And the more people are being told by somms and writers that what does this pair with? They're looking for those wines that are restrained, that are more old world in style, and looking for wines that will pair well with food. So I think it's a combination of both those factors.
Agreed. And and those wines that you were just describing, those are special wines. They can't be made everywhere. You can't source this from Southern California, Washington, and Oregon, throw them all into a tank and say, boom, I've got amazing Chardonnay. These are site-specific wines, like you said, James. These are wines that can only come from unique places, and they're not easy wines to make. People joke about, oh yes, the grapes grow themselves and we don't do anything. We get out of the wine's way. These wines are very, very difficult to make, but if you can execute, you can create something that's really special.
I think that's perfect. And I'd like to thank James for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank America for joining us on the web tonight. And we will be doing Montelena Live on a regular basis, so we encourage you to come back and join us here in the old kitchen of the old chateau as we talk more about our favorite beverage, wine. I'd like to thank my guest, Matt Crafton.
Thank you.
Matt, thank you very much for illuminating us on Library Chardonnay. So let's raise our glasses and say cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, and good night.
Good night.